All right, so we have a level mapped out and we are ready to start working on adding things like enemies. So one thing that I need to do actually is I need to go to my project settings, edit project settings, maps and modes, and I need to set my default level to be whatever level I want to work on. That's going to be the dungeon map. So I'll do that for the editor startup mode and game default map. That way, every time that I go and close and reopen the project, it'll go to the proper scene. So I'm going to go back into my dungeon map, and here we go. So we are ready to start working on our character, or enemies rather. Now, we've actually already imported a skeleton enemy, but for the sake of kind of keeping things simple, I'm going to create another enemy that's going to be really simple, not much to it. Only 2 sprite sheets. That way we can kind of work from there. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new folder inside of my sprites folder, characters, enemies. I'll call it slime. So again, contents, sprites, characters, enemies, slime. Then I'm going to go to import. Now from the raw content folder, I can go to platformer art, curated, characters, enemies, and then slime. And here there are 2 sprites, so I'm going to import those. There's slime and then slime death. Let's get these both ready. So I'm going to select both of these, right click, sprite actions, apply paper 2D texture settings. And then from the slime, I'm going to right click this. I'm going to extract sprites. Then I just need to zoom to where I can see the actual sprites. Then I'll go to sprite extract mode grid, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So cell width 192 divided by 6. And that should do it. So the cell sprite is a lot taller than the actual sprite itself. That's because the death animation, we wanted to have the same size. And that one's pretty big. So do that, then click extract. There we go. And then we'll do the same thing with the slime death. So right click, sprite actions, extract sprites, grid. And it looks like this one is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 6, or this one's gonna be 7. So 224 divided by 7. And there we go. So this is the death animation. When the character dies, when the slime dies. There is no attack animation for this one. All it's going to do is just move left and move right. I'm going to set it up where if you touch it, you end up losing, taking damage. Do that, click extract, and we're good there. We now need to make this flipbooks. So I'll go grab the slime sprite, select all of these. This is the walk animation. Right click, create flipbook. FB_slime walk. I'll grab these for the death one, right click, create flipbook, FB_slime death. So you have the 2 flipbooks. I'm then going to go ahead and create a new folder, and I'll call this one just sprites sheets. And I will drag all of these sprites into that folder. And there we go. So we now have our flipbooks for our slime death and our slime walk. So we're set up to make our character. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go to my content folder, blueprints, and I'm going to right click new folder, and I'll call this one, enemies. Open that up. So we need to make the paper character blueprint for our slime enemy. So I'm going to right click. Actually, we're going to, instead of making one for just the slime, we're going to make one for like a base enemy thing. Then we will create a slime version that will inherit from there. This is so we can more easily make multiple kinds of enemies. So right click blueprint class, And I'm going to search for paper character. Select. I'm going to call it BP enemy base. This is going to be our baseline enemy blueprint. We're going to have our BP slime and eventually maybe our BP skeleton or whatever inherit from there. And then we're going to create a new folder. This will be slime. And then once we have the slime folder, we have our BP enemy base. We can right click our blueprint for enemy base, create child blueprint class. You could also do that from the normal create class window. Well, let's click this, create child blueprint class, and I'll call it BP slime. And I'll drag that BP slime into the slime folder. So we have that. Let's go ahead and open up the BP enemy base and then the BP slime. Now, it is important that we pay attention to which one we're working in. Our enemy base is going to do some basic things that all enemies will have, while our BP slime will have what just our slime enemy has. Well, seeing as we're going to be setting up our BP slime, let's go ahead and make sure we have our BP slime open. We'll set a source flipbook to be FB_slime, slime walk. Once we have that, we can take our capsule component and we're going to take the height and we're going to decrease that a lot. I can see right now that the artwork is going to be way too small. I'm going to compile and save, go to my dungeon map, and I'll test this out by dragging in one of my, dragging in a slime enemy in my scene. Set the Y to 0. Then bring that down so I can see it when I start the game, and I press play and I can see that is way too small. So we're going to fix that. So I'm going to go to my content browser, go to my sprites folder with the slime, open up the sprite sheet, then I'm going to select all of my sprites. So I'll just do this twice for this one, for the walk animation. So I'll do this one, then right click asset actions, edit selection property matrix. So I'm going to select in here sprite and then pixels per unit. I want to make this about 4 times bigger. So I'm going to call it 0.25. I'll save that. I can go back to my dungeon map and see it's bigger. Well, it didn't do that for everything. So let's select everything. Try that again. So I'll select that all the sprites that are there. So the pixels per unit to 0.25 for all of them. And then hit save. And I can see that that's going to be about the right size. That's still maybe a little too small. So let's do this again. Select all these. And I'll try 0.125. All of those, hit save. And that should do. Pretty big, but the size of the enemy, or as the player, so that's fine. And so 0.125 is what we want. I'll close this out, go back to my content browser, and I'm going to select these death sprite animations, right click, asset actions, add selection property matrix, select all of these, and pixels per unit down to 1.25. And get that done and out of the way. All right, close that. Now our sprite is way too low, so I'm going to have to bring that up. And I'll grab my capsule component and I'm going to increase the height. And it helps if you view it from the right, so you can see a little bit clearer. I can see that my sprite's way too high. I'm going to bring that down. Capsule component is too narrow, so I can make that bigger to encompass most of the enemy area. And I'm not going to worry about the things that are hanging out. I'm just going to work with this basic shape. And I'm actually going to decrease the height a little bit. There we go. Remember that this is the area that if our enemy hits it, we're eventually going to lose health. So we don't want it to be unfair. We want it to be pretty much the size of the enemy. So we'll kind of just do our best. And maybe then you still want it even smaller, which you can only go so small, but do what you can. What's important though is that the bottom of your capsule has to be right where the bottom of the slime is. Otherwise it's going to look weird. You compile and save. And then again, checking this out, how this works. It looks. And there we go. That looks pretty good. So I actually ended up taking my sprite and moved it over a little bit so that way the bounds of the animation is always where the top of the head is at. That way it matches pretty close. All right, so we have the animation set up for movement for our slime. We actually have one more step we're going to take here for our sprite for our enemy. Right now the animation is it's walking, and the sprite pack doesn't include an idle animation. So let's make one. I'm going to go back to my content drawer, go to the folder with my sprite sheet for my slime. I'm going to grab slime sprite 0 and slime sprite 1. I'll right click, create flipbook. I'll call it FB underscore idle. I'm going to open that up, and it looks like it's convulsing. It's just like having a seizure. We don't like that. But on the top right, if I go to frames per second, I can set this to 2. It means every second it's going to play just 2 frames, so it's just going to do that, which works. So I'll save this, and then I'll close this flipbook, go back to my content browser, and drag that into the slime folder. That way I have an idle, death, and walk. I go back to my PP slime, and I'll switch my flipbook to the slime idle, FP idle. So we did it based off of the walk animation because we wanted to get the full range of motion, but the idle animation is where it's going to mostly live anyways. So that's just to make sure it's pretty clear and pretty clean. All right, now that we have our flipbook set with the idle animation, let's go ahead and create our animation source. So I'm going to go back to my blueprints folder, enemies, go to the slime, and then we're going to right click in the folder, and we're going to go to PaperZD, and we'll make an animation source. We'll call it AS underscore slime. Open that up. We'll go to add new animation sequence, and we'll find the FB slime idle, and we'll call this one idle. Do the same thing for the other 2. And now once we have all of those set up, we need to make a new animation blueprint. So we'll go back to our content drawer, we'll right click, PaperZD, and we'll do a PaperZD and BP. And it's going to be for the slime. We'll call it ABP underscore slime. Now, before we open that up, let's go ahead and go to our BP slime. And we're going to add component. We'll add the animation, PaperZD animation component. And then we'll select the anim instance class as ABP slime. And then the render component ref to be sprite. Compile and save, and if that worked, the slime still shows up. All right. Now that we have that, we can open up the ABP slime. And then we're actually going to go ahead and leave this here for this video right now. We have the animation blueprint set up. We have a basic animation. We have different parts of the animation set up. Before we bind everything and kind of get things working and moving, I'm going to end it here, and we will pick up the next one.